Nevin hoped to find something, but instead it looked as though he found everything. And it was both hopeful and hopeless at the same time. Hopeful because in this mass of research, countless files, observations, notes, there were bound to be answers hidden. Hopeless, though, as to dig them out of this chaotic pile seemed impossible. The data was organized according to Viveka's whims, and it wasn't a matter of cracking her code here. There was no code. Deep breath. It was doable. The biggest problem was the pressure of time, but the only thing that meant was Nevin had to be methodical. No rampant browsing, going back and forth, slow learning, none of that. Step 1. Find the anchor. A piece of information to give him direction and allow for sensible searching. Nevin liked riddles, and this was nothing but one. His journals could actually prove useful here with their chronicled timeline of Viveka's mumblings. Most of the files had complex scientific names, very specific in regard to their contents at least. It made one called simply Day 1 instantly catch Nevin's attention. It wasn't buried in the tree structure, but lay to the side, seemingly not interconnected with others. Nevin opened it, and a short snicker left his lips. It would appear that for all her mockery, Viveka had a diary of her own. In her defense, the entries seemed dry and were few and far between. The first one was the most recent, dated just weeks before the colony had returned to the surface. Short and sweet, as they say, it detailed, barely, Viveka's idea of how the monumental day would play out. Surprisingly sentimental for her, and Nevin smiled, glad he had made her put on that mask, because even in the diary, it was the key element of her, dare he call it, fantasy. And then, at the end of the entry, he saw something that made him pause, gaping at the words. Simple to many, obvious even. To him the words, "I love that boy of mine," came as a shock. Not a revelation, he knew she had loved him, but to see it written down so verbose. Strange. So strange he couldn't even tell what it made him feel. It wasn't happiness or pleasure. It was, to be honest, some kind of disorientation. Of the fun kind, as weird as it sounded. He should rush to find the answers. But he refused to cut this feeling short. He reread the entry a few times over, and only once the emotion dispersed did he scroll down to the next one. There she talked about the success of her research on the field and the completed air tests on the rats. Goodness, had she hated working with those rats? The entries truly were few and far between. The next one took him several years back, to when they had the first flower growing in the corner of the lab. In Nevin's eyes, it had sparkled like a fantastical artifact belonging to a mad scientist held safely under a misshapen glass dome. The only beautiful thing in a gloomy laboratory. A symbol of lost love, forgotten innocence, or something equally as dramatic. He gazed at the corner where it used to be. The small dome now stood empty. Panther Ray. If he could look into the future, he would close the diary right now. Tell himself that he had no time to keep on reading, or any other excuse, really. He'd go back to the research files containing raw science and nothing more. But alas, though his brain could make the reality look magical, it was merely an illusionist, a crook of a magician incapable of anything any other brain couldn't do. And so Nevin scrolled down. The next entry did speak about the research. It mentioned the science. But it was not filled with useful formulas and charts. It was filled with words that built sentences Nevin didn't quite understand at first. A mutation was complete. A mutation in Nevene was complete. Not a mutation in the flower, not a mutation in his extracted gene, a mutation inside him, caused by the injections. Viveka wrote there that it was finally correct and that it was time to take the tissue sample. The scar on Nevene's leg begins to itch, stronger and stronger. He reaches to scratch it but stops himself and forces his hand back on the desk. His mother speaks about not wanting to scar him any more than necessary, and maybe her aversion should be extenuating, but Nevene doesn't care. More lies, more secrets. He doesn't even notice the blight discolorations on his shin, sneaking out from underneath the leg of his trousers. He becomes frantic again. His breathing accelerates and the anxious squirming in his chest heralds an incoming panic attack. He's trying to read between the lines to find something that makes sense, but there's little to find. The diary doesn't want to change its story. It sticks by it as hard as Nevene tries to stick to his denial. He was not a miracle child. He wasn't born with the gene that saved the colony. Viveka made him the miracle by injecting him with some substances. The vaccines were not vaccines. He didn't need more than other kids because of his gene. All the times he had been sick, and God, he'd been sick so often. He felt the most loved then, as his mother would give him more time and she'd tend to him with such gentle care, so unlike her. All those times it wasn't love that made her so. It was guilt. And then she did it again, and again, and again. He runs out of the lab and out of the temporary, one entry too late. His vision is blurry, and the word becomes hectic as if it's dancing to some foreign rhythm. The instinct is to run to the field and find shelter between the tapping stems, but that is gone now. The blight that covers them terrifies him just as much. He's hot and beginning to sweat. The wind is obnoxiously loud, the sun way too bright. He's running God's nowhere. Everywhere is wrong. The colonists in the town, the blight in the field, the memories at home. He finds himself at the door to Igave's house. He raises his hand to knock, but he cannot do that. He can't let her see him in this state. She might harm the field if she doesn't trust him. He falls down as his body contorts, and he clutches the grass, just trying to get a hold of his emotions, his breathing. He manages to crawl out of sight, finds shelter in the nearby bush. All he can do is wait. It's a long one, and by the time he's done, the leaves by his leg are smeared with his blood. The red is darker than usual, but he doesn't notice the difference. He wipes his nails over the sand and tries to dry the scratched up scar. The itch is gone, together with the scar tissue. It's a relief. There is nothing he can do but go back and find out what it all means. What is this mutation, and is it related to what's happening to both the field and himself? Nevene feels calm as he reads on, numb to the new information. He has no father in Zelem. It was no accident that the field on his birth certificate was empty. His father was, somewhere on the home planet. Young, old, dead, alive. No one knows. No one cares. I presented them with my idea, Viveka wrote. I told them it could let us return to the surface in a decade or two. They were willing to sacrifice 3 lives to secure the area, yet I didn't get a time of day, I am from the redacted, and they can erase the word from every dictionary that remains here, from every book and every mind if they so desire and try hard enough. But a concept doesn't need a name to exist and to persist. I am from the redacted, and so I will never be heard. I stole the spam sample from their cache. They discovered it was missing, but the deed was done and they have no more reason to care. It's not their responsibility this way, after all, and it works for me. I need a child to engineer the gene, and I shall have one. Give me a decade or two, they'll see what fools they were. Or they won't. They might forget why they told me no. But they will feel they had done the right thing, and it just so happened that I managed to save them despite it. Blessed fate. The journal scrolls down for quite a bit more, but all the pages below are blank. There is only one line left before the empty section begins. Past disconcerting, how unsightly. Therefore. Nevene understands. Whatever was below had been erased, and the words in the brackets above had been redacted. It is not an accident either that the communications log is empty. It's all in the same time frame, and he's missing something vital. Who was Viveka to the colony? And what good will understanding the chemistry and biology behind the flowers be if it could be his mother's intent he must unravel? What did she truly want? One thing was certain to Nevene now. She would do whatever she had planned. Her love for him never stopped her from anything. But he is no longer just a tool in her hands.